Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, joined today by the CouchScouts. We've got our wide receiver preview part one, the rookie wide receiver preview part one. And I've got Matt Cooper, I've got Matthew Rupert. Thank you guys for both being here today. And I want to give you a chance right at the top. I know last time you were on, you gave the listeners a little discount, and a lot of people really liked that. And so what do you got for us today?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you for having us. We are running it back. So last time we were on, some of you may have been listening and may remember, we did 50% off using the code FFT for the first 50 people that used the code. And those went like hotcakes. So this time we're going to do the first 100 people that use the code. We're going to give 50% off. So get in there before they're gone. But let me tell you a little bit about it, because you're like, what even is CouchScout? So we're a Dynasty fantasy football website. We have tools and advice and analysis. Most recently, just yesterday, we launched our rookie guide. So 166 pages, 73 prospects. We've got overall rankings that are color-coded by tier. We've got positional rankings, detailed scouting reports. We give numerical film grades for a number of different attributes and categories that kind of spits out an overall grade. And, we've done everything that we can to try to make it comprehensive so that it feels like it's not something you could just find by Googling, but also digestible so that you can, scan through it and get the information that you need, even live on the clock during a rookie draft. So the rookie guide. We've also got bonus podcasts. We've got a free Discord for people to hang out in. We got all kinds of stuff.
Awesome.
And you can get that for normally as little as $5 a month, 15% by buying annually, and then another 50% by using the code FFT. So that's for all of our annual packages. You can get 50% off. So definitely appreciate you guys.
Go check that out, you guys. I took a look at the draft guide the last couple of days, and one of the things that I love about it is that when I look at your rankings, I just don't get a facsimile of the consensus rankings. Like you guys go in depth, and you've got your own process. And it does produce some interesting and I think really helpful results. On today's show, we are going to talk about the consensus top 6 wide receivers in the 2025 draft class. So that is Tetairoa McMillan, Emeka Egbuka, Travis Hunter, Luther Burden, Matthew Golden, and Tre Harris. We will start, as we always do, with 3 questions for the Mats. Matthew Rupert, we'll start with you. Matt Cooper already talked enough, right? We'll start with you. Is this just a mediocre wide receiver class, or is it a bad wide receiver class?
I would say mediocre. I feel like the more I study this class, there's a lot more really good, second wide receivers for a team. There's not a ton of alphas. To me, I think there's 3 guys where you could plug them in and, they can be the alpha on your team. To me, there's a lot of really good, like 1Bs, wide receiver 2s, guys that, could fit a role where they stretch the field or they're more that possession receiver. So when you look at it from a dynasty perspective, there's not a lot of cornerstone guys that you're going to get in this draft. That's on the tight end and the running back side, in my opinion.
Right.
But this side, there's going to be a lot of good, like kind of flex options in my mind, like guys that you can stick in on bye weeks. And then there's some higher upside guys to where if they, can kind of shore up a weakness, they can definitely turn into a plus starter.
I think one of the things that people kind of like disagree about when they talk about it being a bad class or a mediocre class is whether those people are expecting Travis Hunter to be a full-time wide receiver, a part-time wide receiver, or a full-time corner. Because if he's a full-time wide receiver, the class looks a little bit better at the top. And that just kind of filters on down the rest of the way. Matt Cooper, we'll go to you. What is the most important thing to you when you're evaluating a wide receiver on film?
Yeah, so you would think that the first job should be catch the ball, but actually the first job is to get open, right? And so in our weighting on our film grades, we have certain attributes weighted higher than others. And the 2 highest weighted attributes for us is route running and release against press coverage. We feel like, especially with today's fantasy leagues being almost entirely PPR, right? Across the
Right.
board. Like, you get open, you earn targets, you rack up receptions, you score a lot of fantasy points. And, more and more we're seeing the best fantasy producers are the best route runners, not the big bodied X receiver jump ball guys. And so that's going to come up later in the show as we
Right.
talk about some of these guys. But yeah, so our kind of hierarchy of importance, I guess you could say, is route running first, then ball skills. How well can you catch it? Contested catch, body control, all that kind of stuff. Thirdly, yards after the catch. And then athleticism only mattering in so much as it plays functionally into those other three categories. So I don't care how well you tested the combine. If I can't see it show up and leading to you winning on your routes, making people miss after the catch, winning the jump balls, it needs to be functional athleticism.
Awesome stuff. I'm gonna let you guys decide who answers the third question, because I know, like, what I get in the draft guide is kind of, I assume, the consensus opinion of the Couch Scouts, but you guys have your own guys. So whoever the guy is that needs to answer this, go ahead, because you guys do have Daniel Jackson ranked considerably higher than the consensus or really any other rankings that I have seen. So I'm asking the Daniel Jackson guy to please stand up and tell us why.
I'll pass that one to Coop. He has
right.
a slightly higher grade than I do.
So all three of us really enjoyed the tape. The film grade is a composite of our three film grades. The ranking is a composite of our three rankings. So a guy's not going to be that high in our rankings without all three of us being in on him. But yeah, he's just a dang good football player. I got to shout out my friend Skip Newton. He co-hosts one of the podcasts on our feed with me, and Skip is a Minnesota Golden Gophers fan. And so, that's where Daniel Jackson played collegiately. And Skip was like, you got to watch this guy, Daniel Jackson. I think there's something there. And so really the only reason he was even on our list to watch was because Skip told me to put him on there. And I just thought his route running and release really jumped out on film. He had sticky hands, made some really tough catches in traffic, respectable after the catch, and not unathletic. I mean, he's not a burner by any means, but I don't think he's unathletic. So really, I'm just praying he gets a chance, because I hear nothing from anyone on him in the fantasy or the draft community, which is a good and bad thing. Like, it's good because our Couch Scouts are going to get him for really, really cheap. You could probably take him with the last pick in your rookie draft or pick him up off waivers after the draft is over. But the bad half of that is, I fully expect him to be day 3, maybe even undrafted, because I'm just hearing no buzz at all. And you need the guy to get a chance. So praying he gets a chance. But I was really surprised. I had him graded out as a fantasy starter on our film grading sheet, and I had no expectations going into the tape. So I think if he gets the chance, he could be an Adam Thielen type. This was a guy that went undrafted, but earns his way to a long and productive NFL career because he's just a good football player.
So it sounds like you just said that Daniel Jackson is Puka Nacua, and he's going to win people leagues from the 3rd or 4th round. No, he did not say that, but I do also think it's good to know it's not just that Skip had somebody rated as the number 1 wide receiver, and you guys had him at 13, and then he happened to be 6 because of that. You guys were all on board and think he's better than advertised, and that's how you make big gains in Dynasty, is finding those guys in round 3 or round 4 of your rookie drafts that actually turn into producers.
Yeah.
Let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll start with Tet McMillan and work our way through the top 6 wide receivers in consensus rookie rankings. We are back, and we are starting with the consensus wide receiver 1 in the 2025 draft class, and that is not the wide receiver 1 over at Couch Scouts. But let's start with you, Cooper. Matt Cooper, what's your eval on McMillan?
Yeah, so I like Tet McMillan. I have him as my wide receiver 2 currently, and I have him with a grade of a fantasy starter. So and towards the higher end of that. So in our grading scale, like an 80 and above would be an elite fantasy producer, and a 75 to 79 is a fantasy starter. and he's up in the 78 range. So towards the higher end of fantasy starter. There's a lot to like. He's got respectable athleticism for sure for the position. The movement skills, I think, less of a straight line burner and more of a he's got good lateral ability. He's quick in and out of breaks on his routes for being a guy that's as big as he is. And so I think he struggles a little bit with a release off the line. Press coverage, I felt like he didn't have much of a plan of attack. He didn't have a lot of footwork. He kind of was just, I'm going to run in a straight line and try to bully you and then catch the jump ball. So he needs to improve against press coverage for a guy who's going to be an X receiver at the next level. But I think in the short to intermediate area of the field, he can run routes really well, slants, out routes, just these quicker breaking routes. He does a really good job with, and that's why he racked up so many receptions. A lot of times you'll see a guy like a Keon Coleman that's like, oh man, he had like 50 receptions for his whole collegiate career. Tet McMillan had like 90 every year. So he was an absolute target hog, possession guy. And I think that's how he profiles at the next level. Like the ceiling comp for a guy like that would be, and I'm not necessarily projecting that this comes to fruition, but like a Michael Thomas, because he's just, slant god, right? He's catching everything over the middle. He's racking up the receptions, bigger bodied guy, but he's a possession receiver. And I think that's the type of player that Tet McMillan is, but he also has those elite ball skills to go up and make the contested catch and contort his body and toe tap and all that on the boundary. So he wins deep, less with speed and more with the ball skills. But in the short to intermediate, I think he does win with route running. And I think he's a good player, good prospect, deserves to be a first round pick.
Matthew, I speaking of that first round pick, and this is at the very surface level, and I thought this a couple of months ago, like looking at the wide receivers in this class, McMillan seems to remind me the most of the first round busts we've had from the last few years. It's those bigger guys, but listening to Matt's eval, it doesn't sound like that at all. So is that a valid concern?
I think it's a valid concern because we have seen it quite a bit. But to Cooper's point, I feel like he does win on his routes in the short range to where he can rack up targets. And then I think an underrated aspect of his game for being a big guy is his yards after catch. I feel like he transitions so quickly to attacking up the field. When he has his back turn, he has a really good sense of where the defensive back is at to where he can kind of set him up to cut inside or cut outside when he turns around. So to me, he can win early with the slant routes as long as he's not getting pressed. And then he can win deep down the field with his physicality and ball skills. And then he has yards after a catch ability where you can throw him screens and he's going to rack up some yards. So to me, like my concern is his release and being able to consistently win with route running. I feel like I saw some inconsistencies on his film, but to me, I don't think he's going to be a bust. I feel like he's more in that kind of Drake London range where potentially has like a slower start to his career, but I feel like he's a very well-rounded prospect other than his release.
Hopefully he gets better quarterback play
than
Drake London has so far in the NFL. Matt, I haven't actually placed any of the rookies into my dynasty rankings yet. I did put them in the tiers though. So I kind of want to go through some names and you tell me before we have draft capital, before we have landing spot, let's say you're on the clock and can draft Tet, but you have to give up one of these wide receivers. I'm trying to fit him in where you'd put him in the rankings. And let's start a little bit high, I think. Jalen Waddle.
I would take Tet McMillan over Jalen Waddle.
Okay, let's go higher then. Garrett Wilson.
I would take Garrett Wilson.
Matthew, Devontae Smith.
I'd take Tet.
Xavier Worthy.
Ooh. I'd probably still lean Tet. But that was really close to my mind. Really.
Matt with his teammate, Rashee Rice.
I'll take Rice.
So I had him in my tier 5 of the wide receiver rankings, and I had him in the same tier as the top 3 in the class. You guys, I'll throw a couple more. Zay Flowers.
I'll take Zay.
Tet.
Jamison Williams.
Tet.
Okay, so you guys have got him kind of higher in tier 4, not quite a top 12 dynasty wide receiver as soon as he enters the league, unless, and I guess there's a potential he's a top 10 pick and goes to a team that I'm not even thinking of who's in the top 10, but needs a wide receiver and doesn't have a bad quarterback. And then maybe he moves up a little bit, but a high end wide receiver 2 for dynasty purposes sound right, just about right for Tet.
Yep.
Yeah. I think he has more upside than maybe like a Zay Flowers or Devontae Smith. But those guys, Devontae at least feels safer to me. Like I like Devontae to continue to be a high end wide receiver 2 year in and year out. And Zay, I think, obviously the offense holds him back more than anything. He's a really talented wide receiver. So that's right in, Smith, Worthy, Zay is right where it becomes an interesting conversation for me with Tet.
Well, and I think he fits in that tier also because a lot of the wide receivers in that range, like Rice and Worthy, we don't even know for sure who the wide receiver 1 for the Chiefs is next year. Or like Devontae Smith, if Dallas Goedert actually gets dealt away and they don't replace him with a significant tight end. Or like Jamison Williams, like there's a lot of guys with a bunch of upside, but maybe are tiered a little bit higher than what their actual production's been so far. So that is kind of the upside wide receiver 2 range. Let's move on to wide receiver 2 in the consensus rankings. It is Emeka Egbuka, and I probably did just butcher his name again. I've been getting better this year, but it's like 1 out of 6 on every show. It's just I know what I want to say and don't say it. Matthew, I'll start with you on the eval.
I really love him as a prospect. He's not the flashiest guy, but to me, he has 0 holes in his game. He can win short, he can win intermediate, and then he can win deep with not really his athleticism. I feel like he has a lot of nuance to his route running with tempo, head fakes, and to me, his ball skills are phenomenal. He pretty much just catches everything that's around him. Really good body control. To me, again, he shows a ton of nuance with his ball skills, with having late hands. When he's got a DB like right on his hip and he's running down the field, the DB's not looking back. He waits until the last second to throw up his hands, catch the ball, doesn't give the DB a chance to break it up. And to me, he's just been a little overshadowed and maybe just been around for so long that he's kind of lost some of that luster. He's not like the new shiny toy, but to me, he probably has like the safest floor of any wide receiver in this class. And he's another guy that I feel like could end up being a cornerstone of your dynasty roster.
So Matt, you earlier actually compared Tet to a former Ohio State wide receiver, but we've had a ton of them come through the NFL in the last 4 or 5 years, and we've got more coming. Where would you rank this prospect amongst those wide receivers coming out of college?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm seeing a bunch of happy birthday Heath in the comments, so I feel like I should say it on stream. Happy birthday, Heath.
Thank you very much.
Honored that you chose to spend it with us, huh? But yeah, so as far as the Ohio State wide receivers, I think Egbuka, he's not a size speed freak like Marvin Harrison, doesn't have the special twitchy change of direction of like a Garrett Wilson, maybe not quite as fast as Olave, but he's just as polished as all those guys were or more. I think OSU really knows how to develop the wide receiver position, and Egbuka is certainly no exception to that. Like Rupert said, lots of nuance, craft to his game. Very, very good route runner. If I had to pick one of the Ohio State wide receivers to make a 1-to-1 comp, it'd probably be JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba, in terms of just being a big for a slot guy. Playing mostly slot, but with the size to be an outside guy and just bullying people in the slot. Great route runner, great after the catch, really reliable ball skills, not afraid to stick his nose in there and block. So yeah, kind of in that power slot mold that the JSN is in.
So Matthew, I think that's interesting because as I'm listening to you guys talk about Egbuka, it sounds like a guy who could come in and start having success week 1. Maybe he's not the best of these rookie wide receivers for dynasty purposes, but it's possible, depending on landing spot, that he might be the best in their rookie season. You think he is a guy who comes into the NFL just ready to go? Exactly.
I think he's going to come in. He's going to be a coach's dream right away. To me, he does like everything right. And the fact that I may be looking in too much here, but the fact that he's okay, didn't seem to be a diva about being outshined by all these other players at Ohio State. He just stayed there. He didn't transfer. and he just kept on grinding. To me, I think he's a plug and play right away. He's going to be a target hog just because he can win against zone, win against man at all 3 levels. So to me, I think he's just going to come in and put up 70 receptions plus his rookie year.
Matthew kind of referenced this earlier in the show, Matt, but it is a strange time when you're looking at rookie drafts because we're going to have a lot of running backs going really early. And that's something that a lot of dynasty analysts have preached against for the last 5 years, but this is the year for it to happen. So thinking in terms of rookie drafts, how many running backs do you think should be drafted before Egbuka?
Yeah, so I think worth adding to this conversation about Egbuka, we've talked a lot about how safe he is and how ready he is. I also think the upside is there too, more than people want to give him credit for. Like we mentioned that the NFL is moving less towards these big-bodied X jump ball guys and more towards these slot type route runners. And Egbuka is exactly the kind of player that the NFL is trending towards. And you know, this comp is probably a little chalk at this point, but if a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown can be a top 3 dynasty wide receiver, Egbuka is very much in that archetype. And I think he can be a higher upside than he's given credit for. And so with that being said, you know, we have him pretty high in our rankings. The only 2 running backs we've got ahead of him is Hampton and Genty. Okay. And he's just behind Henderson, but I would say in the same tier. Like Egbuka and Henderson, I could go either way depending on the team needs for your dynasty roster. They're very close, even though, you know, we've got Egbuka ranked slightly ahead in our rankings. That's one where if you're on the clock, I'm totally cool taking either one. So yeah, he's right up there with, you know, with Henderson in my mind.
To that point, I just put out my pre-draft rookie top 40 on the site yesterday, and I had Hampton and Henderson and Egbuka all in the same tier. There's one more running back and one more Buckeye that I had in that tier as well, and it's because I had Matt Waldman on for the running back preview, and he loves Quinshon Judkins, and so I've got. We'll see where the chips fall with draft capital, but those 3 running backs, I think. If you're in need of a running back, any of them you could take over Egbuka. If you're in need of a wide receiver, you might be able to take him over any of them, is kind of where I'm at. I think we've waited long enough for this. Let's get to wide receiver 3 in the class. And I know these guys have a lot to say about Travis Hunter out of Colorado. So Matt, you start with the eval, and then Matthew, any like remarks that you've got that Matt leaves out, you just pile on.
Got it.
Yeah, so we were on this show, what was it, about a month ago? As a guest. It was even more than that. It was January. It was pre-combine. So it's January. And we came on and we had just done Travis Hunter for our podcast the week before we got on here. So we were raving about him. And I mean, we had just watched the tape and we said he's clearly the wide receiver 1, like in a different tier than Tet McMillan if he plays wide receiver. And we still feel that way. So that was probably a spicier take then than it is now. I feel like consensus is kind of coming around and saying, yeah, if Hunter plays full-time wide receiver, he's that dude. I saw Harmon put out his RP profile. Matt Harmon, he's kind of the GOAT of wide receiver evals. And he compared him to prime Odell Beckham Jr., which is a high praise. And
it is.
I very much see that. I mean, the movement skills are special. The route running is shockingly advanced for somebody who's only been playing the position for 2 years and has never been able to dedicate himself to it full time because he's been splitting time, you know, with DB, of course, the whole way along. So, yeah, for a guy who's as new to the position as he is, his ball skills are unreal. He catches everything. He can change his body in every direction. His hands are sticky like glue. He beats press coverage at an extraordinarily high rate. I mean, anybody that presses him, he's got a full package of moves and the footwork, the hand fighting, the whole thing. Like he makes them pay. So when I saw Matt Harmon's profile, he was like one of the top 5 ever beating man coverage, one of the top 2 ever beating zone coverage, and like the number 1 guy for beating press, all while having only played the position for 2 years. And all of that is consistent with what we saw on tape. So that was very validating to see that from him. And I think I've got him in the same tier of prospect as I had Malik Neighbors last year. In terms of our film grade, they're very, very similar film grade, but film grade doesn't have a grade for potential.
Right.
And so like Hunter could be even better. And yeah, he's one of my favorite prospects in this class. I think if he's a full-time wide receiver, he's closer to 101 than he is to 103 for me. And I'm all aboard. He's an elite prospect.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I have Hunter like 7 points higher on our film grade than Tet McMillan. And I like McMillan. It's not any shade against him. It's just how much I like Hunter. And I don't think this gets talked about a lot, but his time playing cornerback, I feel like really helps him to know exactly what he's going to do against press coverage and win pretty much every single time. Knows how to beat zone, knows what the defense is doing, so he can figure out how to get open. And then to me, what's so special about him is his hips. And again, this goes back to being able to backpedal, playing cornerback, and flip his hips. He shows that in his route running, and he's just so hard to cover at the stem of his route. He's so hard to cover on his release. To me, like I could see him being a top 5 dynasty wide receiver pretty much right from the get-go. And I think I said this back in January, like I was planting my flag. He's just way too talented at wide receiver to be drafted as a cornerback. I can see him being drafted as a wide receiver and then playing situational cornerback, third down in a game, those kind of obvious passing situations. To me, it's such a game changer at wide receiver.
Yeah, and I hope that as an industry and even on this show that we haven't spent too much time on the questions about where he's going to play and not enough time talking about what an incredibly gifted athlete this guy is. And he does definitely look like one of those guys that like he's never played a sport and you play it competitively and he tries it and he's just better than you the first time he tries it because he's just good at everything he does. And I think what you guys talked about with the route running and the technique in such a short amount of time, like there are some guys that a coach tells them, no, do it this way. And the very next rep, they just do it that way from now on. He has such great control over his body moving at a high speed. So I don't want to spend too much time on the position thing, but I do want to come back to you, Matt, because you guys have him at wide receiver 1 overall and close to the 101. Here's my nightmare scenario. We go through the NFL draft. He goes 2nd overall and he says, I'm going to play both. And the Browns say, we're going to let him play both. And we don't really get more information than that until July. How do you handle him in rookie drafts then?
For me, I just think if I have him graded in the caliber of prospect as Malik Neighbors, and Matt Harmon is comparing him to prime Odell Beckham Jr., and we're right about that, it's hard for me to imagine an NFL team drafting that caliber of wide receiver prospect and being like, nah, we're good on using him on offense. Well, he's a part-time offensive player. We're mostly going to use him at defense. Like, I just can't see it happening. I can't. So I'm taking the risk. The upside to me is worth it. I think he's just that good. And I honestly, I don't know. We haven't seen it done. I'm not opposed to believing that he could try full-time on both sides and actually be successful about it because he's that much of a freak. And he did it in college and was put up some pretty darn good wide receiver numbers doing it there too. I know NFL's a different animal. You got to split time at positional meetings and watching the film and the whole thing. So I don't know, but I'm going to take the risk. I'm viewing him as a wide receiver. I think he's too good not to be a wide receiver.
Okay, so we'll finish up with this, Matthew, because you answered one of my questions already. I was asking how long it would take for him to be a top 5 dynasty wide receiver, or if he could, and you think it could happen very, very quickly. So I want to go back to we've talked a lot of positives about Travis Hunter. Let's forget about the corner thing. Is there any real risk or concern other than that?
I don't have any weakness that I graded out for us with him. The only thing is the knock on him is his size. He's not the biggest wide receiver, but he wins at contested catch rates more than a Tech McMillan, who's, a contested catch monster, and it's by a decent margin. They're more like 70-30 balls with Travis Hunter. He has just a crazy innate understanding of, like how to fight through contact and position himself to make the catch. So to me, I don't see any weaknesses on the film.
That is pretty exciting. Let's take a short break and we'll finish up with wide receiver 4 through 6 in the 2025 wide receiver class.
This is what you were made for.
So I know there's some people, definitely from my home state of Missouri, that are listening right now, and probably all over the country. They're like, how have you guys talked about the top 3 wide receivers in the class yet? And you've not talked about Luther Burden. Let's right that wrong right now. Wide receiver 4, I was surprised he was this low in the consensus rankings, Luther Burden. Matthew, you've got the eval.
I think he's a really good player, and his weakness in my mind is just being average at route running. And this is what I've struggled with my eval, because I feel like he's athletic enough to be a really good route runner. He wasn't really asked to run a ton of complicated routes and pretty much always in the slot. So you didn't really get to see him run routes at every wide receiver position. He wasn't moved around the field, didn't have to fight off press coverage against the number 1 corner a ton. So that's my struggle with his eval. But to me, if he can shore that up, I don't really see any other weakness in his game. I think he's a really good athlete. He can be very twitchy at the stem of his route. And to me, where he really wins is with his yards after catch. It's just phenomenal. And then his hands are incredible. I think he has a really good body control to be able to catch those back shoulder passes, running up the seam, fight through contact to come down with the contested catches. He has really solid hands, really dangerous after the catch, just lacking a little bit with the release and the route running. And to me, he's going to come in. He's so dangerous with his yards after catch because he's quick and he's physical. I think he's just going to get manufactured plays from the get-go. So even if he hasn't rounded out his route running and his skill sets there, to me, I think his 4 is still pretty safe.
Matt, how much of the things that we're concerned about with Luther Burden and the things that we haven't seen are things that we have small sample on tape and it doesn't look good, or just things that Missouri didn't ask him to do because of their offense and their quarterback?
I think it's a little bit of both. I do think, like Rupert said, there's flashes athletically of him like flipping his hips, snapping out of a route break, running a really good route, and you're like, wow, like that's he has the movement skills for sure to be a really good route runner. And there are also times where the routes are rounded off, they're not as crisp as they need to be. Like technically, I think he just has a lot of polish he needs to add to his game, but he can do it. So we're not talking about like a Malachi Corley here that's like, he can't beat man, he can't beat press, he can't beat zone. He's purely a manufactured touch guy, and he's probably not talented enough to actually get those manufactured touches at the next level. Like, no, this is a guy who's already a very serviceable route runner. He can win. He's got a ton of room to improve. And when he gets the ball in his hands, he's absolutely special. He's also got good ball skills. I think he does pretty well for a smaller player in those contested situations. He's got nice body control. He's got reliable hands. So overall, like when I have him in my film grades, I've got him with the exact same film grade as Egbuka, to a decimal point, and like half a point lower than Tet McMillan. So he's right there in that same tier with those guys. The only reason I have him slightly lower than the other two is honestly because of this noise that we're starting to hear from NFL circles. It's getting louder and louder about him being, kind of bad work ethic, bad attitude, maybe dropping him out of the first round. He wasn't happy at Missouri, so he wasn't giving his best effort. And so, again, I don't know how much credence to give those things, but if he's tied with 2 other guys or slightly behind and they don't have those concerns and he does, then I'll drop him just lower. So I've got, Tet, then Egbuka, then Burden, but they're all really close for me. I think Burden is a first round talent. The Debo comp is kind of tired, but he does, because he's a bigger bodied guy that can actually take the beating and break the tackles. I think the comp fits, and he's got the upside actually to be a better route runner than Debo if he develops and polishes in that area. So I really like Burden as a prospect.
Matthew, I wonder, because I know, like, I've seen those three, Tet, Burden, and Egbuka, I think in almost every order imaginable. Do you think it's true that Burden has more upside because if he fixes those flaws, the best version of him is better than the best version of the other two?
It's really close to me. I feel like him and Tet are very close because I think Tet is really good with his physicality and yards after catch as well. Burden's a little bit more explosive, better long speed. So I can totally see a world where he ends up being, higher than them in production. He goes to the right situation. To me, why I have him lower is I feel like he's more situational dependent.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Let's get to wide receiver 5 in the class, Matthew Golden, the speedster. Matt, what's the eval on Golden?
I think he's a good player. I was surprised when I started hearing so much first round buzz on him because, even before the combine, when he ran the 4.29, I was hearing guys like Lance Zierlein, Dane Brugler, Daniel Jeremiah, like really connected NFL guys that had him in their top 2 or 3 wide receivers. And I'm like, oh, wow, like I need to watch this guy because he's a Devy name. I play in Devy leagues and didn't really do anything at Houston.
Right.
The production at Texas was just okay. And then all of a sudden, we're hearing about him as a first round talent. And I was surprised. But when I got onto the tape, like I could see why. He's fast. He snaps out of his breaks really crisp, really clean. He's got above average ball skills, like really tough receiver, can catch things outside away from his frame with regularity, does the toe tap really well. Like overall, I don't think he's elite at anything, but he's good at everything and great at some things. So he's a good prospect. I've got him just a tier below the other guys that we've talked about in my film grades. He's in that 76 range, so still graded as a fantasy starter, but a little bit more on the low end rather than a high end like the guys that we've talked about. And, certainly I would not have thought of him as a first round prospect, but if he is, that means he's going to get opportunity. And I do think he's good enough to do something with the opportunity. I'm not out here saying, he's a bust like a Quentin Johnston a couple of years ago. I was like, I don't care if he gets first round draft capital, I'm out. That's not how I feel about Golden. I think if he gets the capital, I'm in on him as a solid wide receiver 2 type of player.
So I do think he's elite at one thing, running a 40-yard dash. He is definitely elite at the 40-yard dash. Matthew, you hear all of that though, like, oh, he's actually got really good skills and he's not great at anything, but he's good at everything. And he runs a 4.29. How was this guy not more productive in college?
That's a phenomenal question that I've been asking myself as well. To me, one, I don't think he ran a 4.29 on the field. To me, when I watched the tape, I feel like Isaiah Bond and Jaden Blue on the same team looked more explosive. Not to say they slow. I feel like those two guys are faster. So to me, he looked more like a high 4.3 guy with pads on. And I also I feel like inconsistent effort level. I mean, not to throw too much shade at him, but to me, he just didn't really look like the alpha wide receiver on the field. He does look like a number 2 when it doesn't seem like he's going to get a target running kind of lackadaisically. Just didn't seem like a full effort player all the time. So I think he has high upside. To me, if I had to comp him, I'd say like a Jordan Addison kind of player. Probably best as a number 2 on a team.
Doesn't really matter if you can run a 4.29 when you're running the 40-yard dash if you don't play at that speed regularly. Yeah. And if your effort's not consistent, both of those things matter. Matt, you mentioned earlier the fact that there is talk that he could sneak into round 1 in this draft, and maybe the 40 time helped with that. Or with your kind of where you've tiered him at right now, is that assuming a late round 1 draft capital, or will you be moving him up if that happens?
No, I'm already assuming that. I think he was trending towards being a first round pick even before the combine. I mentioned all these connected NFL guys were touting him as a top wide receiver in the class. And then the combine, I think, just cemented it. To me, first round seems like a lock at this point. I'd be shocked if he wasn't a first round pick. He's been invited. He's attending the draft on day 1. Like I think he's a lock for that. So I'm not going to double count it. I'm not going to bump him up my rankings. That's already projecting that in my ranking of him.
So I think for everybody, there's a pretty clear top 4, at least consensus wise, not for you guys necessarily, but a lot of people have Golden at 5. And then you might be able to find 12 different answers for who is wide receiver 6 in this class amongst the different experts. We're using the consensus ranking. So we've got Tre Harris up next. Matthew, what's the eval on Tre Harris?
I think he's a really solid prospect, and to me, he really struggles with inconsistency. I rewatched some tape this morning because it's been a while since we studied him, and to me, the LSU tape last year really sums up his game. One of the first plays, he gets open deep. He's very smooth, has good build-up long speed, especially for his size. And he gets open deep on a 9 route. And then he lets the ball come into him. He basically just tries to cradle it into his body and drops it. It was a beautiful throw, hits him in stride, and he drops it. He didn't reach out and, attack the ball, which I would like to see in that situation. And then coming back later in the game, he's running up the seam, and he's got a defender right on him, and he basically goes through him to get the touchdown catch. So you see it in some areas, and you don't see it in others. And to me, that kind of wraps up his eval. A little bit inconsistent. And then to me, he wins really early. I think he has a good release for his size. He can win on slants, little hitch routes, wide receiver screens. I think he's surprisingly good with his yards after catch. He's not a burner, but to me, he's just really smooth and efficient with his movements, which I really like to see. Man, he wins deep. I don't really see him win in the intermediate range a ton.
And that matters a lot, Matt. Yeah. One of the things I noticed is he's not in the CouchScouts consensus top 6 at wide receiver. Did Matthew just lay out all the reasons why? Is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's because we like other guys better.
That's fair.
That's a cheeky response, but in all seriousness, this isn't a situation where we hate Harris or we're telling everybody, fade him. None of us disliked him as a prospect. We had him with, really good scores for route running and release for a big guy. Solid ball skills, pretty average athletically, but like he mentioned, pretty good after the catch. So, solid player. We have him graded as a flex option. He's our wide receiver 9. But not a huge gap for us between wide receiver 6 and wide receiver 9. That's all. It's a pretty flat tier, I think. And we just liked a couple other guys a little bit better. But I think my biggest question is when I look at X receivers in the NFL right now for fantasy purposes, you've got your elite guys, Devontae Adams, T. Higgins, AJ Brown. And then who else is a big bodied X receiver that we care about for fantasy? There's just, Cortland Sutton, I guess. Then the rest, you got Devontae Parkers and Cedric Tillmans and the Josh Reynolds of the world. And it's it feels like in today's NFL, if you're a big bodied X receiver, you're either elite or you're not that good for fantasy. And I don't think Tre Harris fits the bill of one of those elite guys. So I'm worried about what is his range of outcome in terms of fantasy production.
That makes all the sense in the world. I wanted to hit on one last idea, Matthew, and it has to do with Tre Harris because he is already 23 years old. He's the oldest player we've talked about here in the top 6. And you can talk about how much that matters for Harris, but also, and if you guys are different on this, please say it, but how much it matters to you how young a player is, both coming into the NFL and when they had their breakout season.
I think it's really beneficial to look at that when you have guys that are in that same tier, like Cooper said, like we have a bunch of guys that are within like 2 points on film grade. Not a lot of difference there at all. So when you start looking at, well, what's their upside? Well, I'm going to take a guy that's only 20 years old or 21 years old over a guy that's already 23 because they're 2 years behind on the development curve already. You got 2 less years that they're going to be in the NFL. So to me, if they're in that kind of same tier, I don't have really any other concerns. I'm going to look at age as kind of like a tiebreaker there.
Excellent stuff. Is that kind of how you handle it too, Matt?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it doesn't have to be a deal breaker. Like Terry McLaurin was 23 or maybe even 24 coming in as a rookie.
Yeah.
Has had a very good fantasy career and been a nice dynasty asset. But yeah, for sure. So it's not a deal breaker, but it'd be kind of silly, I think, not to account for it. So yeah, it's a variable. It factors in probably more as the tiebreaker, like he said.
And I think like there are guys like Joe Burrow where this scenario plays out and they're just awesome. But it worries me more if a guy is like 500 yards receiving through his age 22 season, and then he's older than everybody else, and all of a sudden he puts up 1,200 yards. And I just wonder, like, well, he's playing against 18 and 19-year-olds, and I guess there's not as much of that as there used to be. They're all 20 now. But yeah, it's something to consider. Don't let it be the end all be all, but it's a great tiebreaker. Matt, one more time, just tell everybody about Couch Scouts and how they can become a part of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the brand kind of came from like, we're just a couple guys on the couch that like to scout NFL prospects. We love to play dynasty fantasy football. I think over the years, we've gotten pretty good at doing these film evaluations and finding edges that translate to help you dominate your fantasy league. Like our philosophy is, if you can scout really well, then you can dominate your rookie draft. And if you dominate your rookie draft year after year after year, you're going to dominate your fantasy league. So that's what we do. We have the rookie guide that I mentioned, 166 pages, 73 plus prospects. It is a labor of love. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into making that thing. We think it's the ultimate cheat sheet for dominating your rookie draft. We have bonus podcasts every week just for our paying subs as well. We have people can schedule 30-minute one-on-one consultations with us to talk over their dynasty roster and get strategy help. We have an all 22 film room that has IDP and Devy players in it. So guys like Jeremiah Smith or Abdul Carter, Arch Manning, like those types of guys are in our all 22 film room. So we've got a lot that you can get within the Couch Scouts membership package. Our plans start at just $5 a month. And like I said, right now we are doing 50% off for the first 100 people to use the code FFT at CouchScouts.com.
Thank you, Matt Cooper. Thank you, Matthew Rupert. Thank you guys. Go check out Couch Scouts. You will not be disappointed. Thank you to Thomas for making everything work. Thank you to everybody who was active in the chat, especially those happy birthdays. I appreciate it. We will talk to you on Friday with the rookie wide receiver preview part 2.